As an academician, I feel like our duty is to serve the society. I feel this is serving the society. My field is landscape horticulture. So basically, when I was doing my PhD and postdoc, it was focusing on molecular fingerprinting and looking at how plants behave when they are under stress. So it was purely scientific training. And when I returned to AUB, I moved into this direction and I built a laboratory trying to sustain this level of technology in my research. And then after a while I felt like I had to make a decision about my life, not my work, and which is that I know I can do the research and publish, but at the same time I know that it's useless for the country. Because, for example, I would collect different olive trees or pistachio trees, and I will do the molecular fingerprinting. But then I know that these trees are going to be destroyed and cut because of the social setup and all these things. And so during, in this middle career, and despite the fact that, we have promotion and tenure pressure and all these things, I decided to go with my gut feeling. And I had an open house for all my equipment. And I said, come and take everything. And it's very costly to have DNA gels and all these things. So I just said, come and take everything. And that was the way to force myself to change direction completely. If you look through my publications, you can see there is gradual shift into social science. Each paper is a bit moving into this direction. So you start with molecular fingerprinting of this and that, and then field assessment of plants, and then it goes into how people perceive plants, how people perceive vermicomposting, etc. So it's starting to shift, but it's very difficult. It's sad that people have to fit you into a discipline, because when you are in a developing country, at least, you just respond to what's around you and you do what needs to be done. So I spent about 5 to 10 years creating the Nature Conservation Center, which was IPSAR before, trying to convince people that you don't have to be a biologist to conserve nature. You can do anything in your respective disciplines and contribute to establishing a rapport between people and nature. So I founded the center. And at the same time, I went to the field. So I launched this project, which is called the Biodiversity Village Award, Baldati Biati. So basically what I do is like a participatory mapping, where I decided not to have a research agenda, to just go and facilitate a process where people can do a self-assessment in their own villages. So we have till now 80 villages that have done their self-mapping. So I have different directions. One direction is related to the general audience, which is like the Trees of Lebanon book, where, because I have interacted so much with people, I feel that there is this need to simplify. We started with something called the Biodiversity Center, and it's just nature, it's just life, it's just. And so this is something I do all the time. Of course, if they don't feel that these trees are part of their history or their heritage, why would they connect? I try to to find the story that links us. And it wasn't easy because all the information is produced in Europe and in the US, etc. So trying to find anything linked to the Middle East was not very easy. And so I had to create, and I thought, why not? I can draw on what's available and make it important. Why not? Reforestation should not be a project. It should be a lifestyle. You do it. You just plant trees because you plant trees. Next to you. I'm not telling them to go and drive. Just in your own village. So now I have a book for children, alphabet. It's called Alif Ba al-Tabi'a, the ABCs of nature. So it's just alphabets and scenes that I'm illustrating. Also, I'm learning. I don't know how to draw. I'm doing that also. Because, when you want to communicate, you communicate depending on age and interest. So there is a general public where, it's really intriguing that it takes much more effort to relay information to the general public, but there is no way that it is evaluated. It looks like outreach, service. It's not looked at as anything that is important, but I'm doing it all the time because I feel that this is something, I'm, as an academician, I feel like our duty is to serve the society. I feel this is serving the society. I used to read a lot in French, not in Arabic.
Okay.
And I always read, I always have like 2-3 books next to me. And it depends on, the phase in life, you read different things. But I never thought that I would write. I never connected what I read with my writing because my writing was different. But since I made this change, I identify more myself as a writer. Before I was a scientist. So now it's not easy. I enjoy writing. I enjoy, and I spend hours just sitting there and writing and even thinking whether it means what I wanted to say or not, even if it's not very well written. This is why I try to learn the jargon also. The issue is not writing, but it's also learning the jargon, because I can say something very clearly, but it doesn't make it because it has to be said differently. I write in English. I read in English and French and Arabic. Any book I read in the original language. But I learned now, for example, when I want to write for the general audience, I learned to think in Arabic. And even though my writing skills are not good, but I learned that if you translate, if I think in English and translate to Arabic, it doesn't work. So the strategy is different. When I'm thinking of the Lebanon or whatever, I think in Arabic, I say it to myself in Arabic, and then I write it in English. Because I learned, for example, when we started with the projects, one of the this project where you want people to plant, we called it the power of planting. That you have that power. And it made a lot of sense. This is when I started. But in Arabic it's horrible, because power in Arabic is force. It's perceived as force. And so I learned then that the whole Trees of Lebanon book, I was reading in English but thinking in Arabic. How do you say, what would you tell people, etc. And then the language also is a major issue, because if you say biodiversity, it's a common thing, biodiversity. People, It's nice, it's simple, yeah, people say it. But in Arabic, it sounds very scientific. And then nature, you can say nature or environment. And even if you say, the differences are, it's different. And so I felt that, okay, maybe what I want is to ask people, okay, what do you call that? And see what they call it. And then I use what they call it. And also sometimes, one of the surveys I did, and I said, where is nature? I asked them, where is nature? So a lot of them said, in the olive groves. Okay. So if for them, cultivated terraces are nature, so this is rural nature. And we cannot say that nature is only the protected area. So two things I try to do. I try to make them feel nature, which is very difficult. There are kids that if I just take them to walk around campus, they start screaming and they're tired. And for them, it's like a huge nature expedition just walking here. So what I try to do is experience a plant, experience nature, understand why, etc. So not the science, but the why and the how, and what. So there are two directions that I engage them in. One of them is to explore and report. So for example, they go to a protected area and I ask them to give their assessment, their perception, talk to the management, see what are the challenges, etc. So they understand nature within the social context. And so they are always have these, and then they present them to the class. And the other thing is research. So they are required to do a research project. So for example, we have these allotments. So for the horticulture therapy, so they interview the people, they ask them why they're doing it, why they joined, etc. So they have like a research project. And then what I found that was interesting in the horticulture therapy course, there are some issues, for example, to show that nature is important and plants. So for example, if you have an office without a window, you tend to put pictures of nature in your office, etc. Some things that they read that are facts and studies. So what I realize is that in the beginning of the semester, when they are reading these papers, case studies, so every 1 or 2 students read and present these papers. Okay, they present them, they write. And then I say, okay, now you repeat it here. You repeat that experiment here. And so, they are amazed because it's real. It hits them. So they go on campus, they look at offices or they interview people and I don't know what. And then it's like, it is real, and then they have a completely different appreciation of that. So research is very important. They come and they, first they feel like they have to give me a report. And I say, I don't want to give me anything. It's your research. So for them to learn the process of writing a paper with, the methodology. And this helps me from my scientific background because I know how to structure how they can go by these experimentation. The feedback is about the content, the ideas, how they can make them clearer, discussions that they may have missed. So it's like a review. For example, when they write the paper, it's, I keep saying, keep sending me drafts until you're satisfied. I say you can keep increasing your grades as much as you want. So this is where I say, can you elaborate on this? How is this linked to your finding, etc. So they do, and then I. So it's a back and forth. So it's open. The interdisciplinary research doesn't happen for many reasons.
Yeah.
Of course, the basis is the individual. And some people like to stay alone, some people like to work in groups. And there is a basic element that is there or not there. Mm-hmm. But there is also major institutional problems. And they tell you, we encourage you to work together, it's a work the interdisciplinary, but it's not true. The structure, the reward system, the publication venues, everything is not there to allow you. So you do it in spite. You don't really do it because you're supported. And the department and your discipline and your I don't know what, and where do you get your funding and where do you put it and who gets what. But also, other than that, and there is the university problem, but there is the faculty problem. Some faculties, they will not do anything if they don't have like this extra pay to do whatever. And it's also different cultures and different ways of thinking about being involved in things that are not in your direct field. And if you want my time in this, okay, pay me, I'll do it. There are different cultures, and there is the personal, the culture, and the institution. And they all work against this. Even the world is not for collaboration. They want leaders. They don't want people who are team players. Everyone has to be a leader. We're all bosses and strong. There's a paper that was just published, and it was about children's perception of nature. And it's a very nice project because I used the photo voice. They take photos, you train them. And, And so when I did this project, I didn't really intend it as a full-fledged research. It was a workshop activity just to get the children to connect with nature. And we trained them and we told them, go take photos of nature. And the photos they took were amazing. Someone took the photo of his grandmother. Someone took photo of his eye. Someone took photo of a window. And I was like... And it's nice because we asked them to explain why. And it was amazing, and I thought, this child that says, I took this photo because nature kept my grandmother healthy, this is the summary of the eco-health $1 million budget. This person has not heard of anything. So I worked a lot on trying to publish this work. It took me like 2-3 years, and it wasn't accepted. And then when I was learning about qualitative research, I just tweaked some word, instead of saying perception of, I said content analysis of, instead of this and that, and then it worked.